Welcome to Women Winning Divorce. I am your host, Heather Quick. I am an attorney, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Florida Women's Law Group, the only divorce firm for women by women. I love thinking big, thinking outside the box, creating creative solutions for women, and empowering women to win in all aspects of their life. Our approach at Florida Women's Law Group is to provide women with a strategy to not only achieve their objectives, but win at life. I believe that what may show up as adversity is simply an opportunity to change and improve your life. In each episode, I sit down with innovative professionals and leaders who are focused on how you can be your best self before, during, and after divorce. In these conversations, we are looking at how women can win at life. I have the unique opportunity to meet women when they are at a transition period of life. But that is only the beginning to becoming your best self and winning at life on your terms. With our guests, we enjoy the opportunity to explore ways all women can win and enhance their life, no matter where they are in their journey. Because divorce is just a point in life, not the end and not what defines you, rather a catalyst for your growth. Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, I'm joined by Brenda Bridges. Brenda is a certified divorce financial analyst, mediator, certified divorce coach, retirement income certified, and last but not least is the author of Oh Shit, I'm Getting Divorced. Welcome, Brenda.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here with you.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. This is going to be a great episode on the top 5 financial mistakes in divorce. So welcome, because boy, I know there's more than 5, but we want to cover the top 5, right?
Right.
So Brenda, please tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are professionally.
Okay, well, it's been kind of a windy road or zigzaggy path. I ended up where I am professionally because I went through a divorce that was, in my opinion, needlessly expensive. It took a long time. It was very contentious. There were mistakes made, all the things. And when it was over, just walked away like so many of us do with the thought, there's got to be a better way. So I got myself educated about divorce and the process and help other people go through it, hopefully with less expense, less time, less contention, and fewer mistakes. Ideally, no mistakes.
Well, that is a lofty goal, but I am certain that you help people so often because just educating, just being educated in the finances and what to look out for can make a huge difference in a divorce. Now, how does your work in finance intersect with family law, like on a daily basis?
It is the majority of my practice. I still do some wealth management because I started as a financial advisor, but most of the work I do is either mediation, where I'm working as a neutral party with a couple, or if I'm in an advisor capacity, then I'm working in tandem with an attorney, helping the clients kind of navigate the process as a coach, but also to really understand their finances and the decisions that they're making. And hopefully in that way, I'm really helping them be a better client for their attorney, because then they're more prepared and they understand both what's at stake and what they need to decide.
Which really is important. And I think that's, what you said, a better client. It's really just better prepared, but there's such a learning curve when you're entering this process of divorce. It's just so much to learn and understand that I know it's a struggle for so many clients. And certainly in that coaching role with your background would make a big difference for most clients. Now, how do you distinguish yourself? I mean, I kind of feel like you are distinguished and definitely unique because of the financial approach, with the coaching and your certification. But, in approach or philosophy, like within your specialization, how are you different?
That's a really good question. I think because I help my clients stay goal focused and future focused, rather than looking at the day their divorce is final as, okay, we're all done here, move on. if we focus on what they want their life to be like after divorce and work through both the emotions of that and the logical part of it, because they interact, we make financial decisions emotionally, much as we would like to say we don't. We're emotional creatures. We're not all logic all the time. So helping people balance that so they can really get at why they're making the decisions they're making and owning them themselves, not rather than kind of, I guess, being told what to do, that they're in a position where they can make good choices for themselves.
Yeah,
Did I answer that question?
that is a really good answer to that question. And, I know that you mention often that your work is really bridging the financial and emotional decisions of divorce. And could you go a little deeper with our listeners? Like, how can you help somebody with that?
I guess if they feel, I'm trying to think of a good, like the simplest example would be if someone feels they're stuck on having to have a number. And let's say that number might be, 52%. Why? Because it's more than 50. So they win, they get more. Really working with them to, what does that mean? How do we put that in context? Like, is 52% enough, or would 25% be enough? It depends on of what and what we're trying to do. So if we back things up and work with them to understand their goals about things like, what is it going to take to live with a decent standard of living post-divorce? Do you have the resources to do that? Are you going to have to get a job, even though you haven't worked outside the home in a long time? A lot of the work is kind of a reality check.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also really putting their unique situation in context, so that given that context, rather than win-lose, they know what they need to decide and why.
Mm-hmm.
And whether something, as they're talking about a settlement, whether it's in mediation or it's in litigation, is it adequate? Is it, let's answer what is enough rather than I just want more.
That's a really good point, because then you're making a better decision, not just, this is what it has to be because this equals winning, versus what is really winning, right? In getting these, things in place so that you can build a future and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at what point in your career did you realize you were going to specialize in financial services? And then I imagine it was, I guess I'm imagining, I don't know. And then it went to specializing down to really focusing on divorcing clients. Please tell us how that happened.
Well, that was an accident. It was a total and complete accident. So I started my career in marketing and advertising, and then I went on and had my own marketing firm. And then I had 3 kids, and I stayed home with my kids and raised them and did a lot of community volunteering and things like that. And then as they were getting older, I was teaching yoga. That was my outside of the home thing. And then my husband, who was by far the breadwinner of the family, so he was high income earner, he lost his job. And when he lost his job, I looked around and said, yoga will probably not put kids through college, and yoga teachers don't get benefits. So we needed both of those things. So I got licensed as a financial advisor because my advisor had been for at least a decade saying, you really should do this, because we'd have our meetings and I'd have all my spreadsheets out and be all organized and ready to go. I was kind of into it. So I became a financial advisor kind of by happenstance. That's how I landed in it. Then I was about 1.5 years in when my husband came home and said he wanted a divorce. So, and he at that time had not been working. I did not know that he had gotten a job at the time he told me he wanted a divorce. But he had, and then we went through the divorce process, which was about 1.5 years. And then when that was done, that's when I really saw the need for demystifying a lot of the financial decisions that go on, which are so very different than regular financial planning. It's just a horse of a different color, if you will. The things that we look at for finances, there's some overlap, and a lot of it is useful post-divorce for planning, but how to have a smarter step settlement, the things to look out for, what mistakes can be really costly, because then you're putting them in whatever it is called in your jurisdiction, right? Your dissolution of marriage agreement or marriage settlement agreement, whatever it's called, that's a contract. And if there's a mistake in that contract that's filed with the court, it can be very costly, as you know, to walk. You can't walk it back. You have to fix it, and you might not be able to.
Yeah, most of the time you can't. So it's very, very costly for sure. Now, and then you wrote a book. So tell me, when did that come along and how did that happen?
Then I wrote a book. Yeah, it was published last fall. So it's available on Amazon. Interestingly, it never occurred to me until it was out there for purchase that some people do not want to purchase it on Amazon because they have a joint Amazon account and it will show. Kind of a funny story. A friend of mine bought the book as being supportive, essentially.
Right.
And her husband saw it on their account and just said, do we need to have a talk? So we also sell it directly from the office and have hard copies in the office or e-reader copies if people don't want to go through Amazon because they don't want it to show up in their records. And really what the book is for is the things over the years that I've learned help people have a better process. And it's through, much as today we're going to talk about mistakes that can be made in financing, it's really how to figure out what's best for you as you're approaching divorce, as you're going through your financial settlements, as you're figuring out what your parenting plan is going to be in a really thoughtful way, rather than the knee jerk, which is kind of I call it a societal meme for divorce, run out, hire an attorney, you've been served. Really, there's a lot to figure out before hiring that attorney to make sure you're getting a good professional partner. If they might have been the best attorney ever in the world for your cousin or your neighbor or someone you work with, they might not be the best for you. So it really is going through a lot of the exercises of what are your goals in getting divorced, what you want life to look like later, knowing the different types of divorce that are available to you, because it's not all litigated. There are different ways that one can go about it. And then, so basically figuring those things out first, and then finding professionals that complement that support that fit that. Instead of, if you rush out and you hire a litigator and then you say you want to mediate, that might not be the best fit, and you've already engaged the individual, and then you're much more likely to follow that process. Yeah. So
now, well, that's very interesting, and I do have to ask because it's popped into my mind twice so far in our conversation. The breakdown of your clients, is it more females than males? Obviously your mediation, you're the neutral party, but in the coaching, and as the certified, divorce, financial analyst.
The majority of my practice is mediation. So that's,
okay.
And in mediation, and I practice, I call it informed mediation, because rather than simply helping, and it's not simple, I shouldn't use that word that way, rather than being there solely to help people come to an agreement where they're having difficulty, I provide them a lot of information so that they have the financial information to discuss, to make their decisions, so that they have the prompts for what makes a good parenting plan, rather than simply filling out. In that case, I definitely mean simply, rather than simply filling out the state form, because some of them are really cursory and they don't address a lot of the things that make co-parenting sticky. So, and in mediation, I would say, interestingly, it's usually the man who finds me rather than the woman. Not always, but if I had to say what that breakdown is, it's usually the male.
And you're in Tennessee, right?
I'm in Tennessee. I work with people, both couples and individuals throughout the country.
But not in mediation. You can't mediate, or can you mediate outside of
can.
Tennessee? Do you have, and I guess, well, I'm not going to get too into the weeds in that right now, but I'm not surprised. We have a lot of clients that the husband wants to mediate and does
Right.
not want them to have an attorney. The women on that
Now,
side.
in that, I suggest they always have an attorney, even when we mediate. And even in those places where they're able to file their own paperwork, if there are assets and children involved, I think an attorney should be involved.
Absolutely. Now, is Tennessee mandatory mediation? We have mandatory mediation in Florida. So is it is in Tennessee as well? I was shocked to hear so many states do not.
Yes, it's mandatory mediation, but it tends to be, at least in my market, a different style of mediation where there is very little preparation, if any. They basically show up, see if they can spend a couple hours, come to an agreement. If they can, great, write it up. If they can't, go down the litigation path. So it's not an ongoing or a very structured practice in those that I've encountered.
Okay, interesting.
Mine is very structured.
Got it. Okay.
So it's a little bit different than the, it's called here, it's a Rule 31 mediator. So yeah, it's kind of, the path tends to be people engage an attorney, then the attorneys will schedule mediation because they're going to have to do it anyway. Very little work goes into the case on either side beforehand. Again, my experience.
Got it.
And then they'll have the mediation and then they'll decide what happens next.
Interesting.
So I think it often leads to out of context. So I'll tell the story of, I have a client who found me after her first mediation. During the mediation, they had no preparation. Her spouse offered, let's just say $100,000. And her attorney said, great, you'll get some money. That was that. And she said, I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't know what it means. Well, if they have $100,000 and the offer is $100,000, wow, that's amazing. If they have $1 million and the offer is $100,000 and they've been married for 25 years, not so amazing. So it had no context. And she was being told, well, you'll get some money. Like, my goodness.
Yeah. Oh, those are terrible stories. But of course they do happen when you don't know what exists and what's available. Now, okay, the title, let's get to the title of this episode where, we're going to talk about the top 5 mistakes. And, specifically for this podcast, mistakes that, financial mistakes that women going through a divorce can make, that, I mean, anyone can make them, but of course, that's what we're talking to today. And I'd like to talk through those top 5. So let's go through. Let's start with number 1.
Number 1, not considering tax implications. So by that, I mean, let's use $100,000 again. $100,000 in a house in equity and $100,000 in a 401k and $100,000 in a savings account are not the same $100,000. And oftentimes that's really not understood until it's too late or final. So that 401k is going to be taxed, and it will be taxed at the time you take it out at whatever the current income tax rates are. So I don't know about you, but most people I know think taxes are probably going to go up. We're in a low tax bracket or a low tax scenario. And unless Congress changes it, our current taxes are going up in 2026 regardless. The current tax law is sunset, so the taxes are going up. So if someone gets that $100,000 and they're 40 years old and they don't handle it properly, and it's in a 401k or a rollover IRA, they might not be able to access that money for close to 20 years. And when they
Mhm.
do access that money, they're going to pay, let's call it 30% taxes on it. So that $100,000 might really only be $70,000. The $100,000 that's in a savings account, that's cash. That's $100,000.
Mhm.
The $100,000 of equity in the home depends on whether you can access that money, because you can't eat your house or pay your bills with it. So you might get that in equity, but the tax ramifications are, if you get capital gains on that, then you could pay capital gains tax on it, even if and when you sell the house. And that comes as a surprise to some people. So
Mhm.
knowing, as you're looking at all your assets, will it be taxed? When will it be taxed, and how much it will be taxed, can make a big difference. And financial advisor hat on, I look at the taxes differently than, say, a lot of attorneys. I had a client last week whose attorney said, basically, kick the taxes down the road, delay it, don't pay it until, basically take the money in a 401k or some kind of retirement account.
Mhm.
Delay the taxes, pay them down the road. Well, I guess if you don't want to pay them until later, that could be a good idea. But again, financial advisor hat on, I would prefer to see that client take the money in a brokerage account where the taxes are going to be 15% capital gains tax rather than a 30% income tax, and pay it now, reinvest it, and not pay money on the gains versus having to pay money on everything that account earns in the future as well. So it's looking at where a tax liability might sit, and then
Mhm.
making sure people are aware so they can make their own decision again about how they
Mhm.
want that to look.
Yeah, and that's really important. And so obviously tax returns, and very often we do hire, tax professionals to advise the clients, because when they look at the old tax returns, and particularly looking at what properties, investments, and where maybe some things have been depreciated, some things have not, and the spouse with more knowledge may be negotiating for things that he knows there's a future tax benefit
Right.
versus not. And I know this sounds complicated for our listeners, but there's a lot to it. The more you've got, and the more you've acquired throughout the years, the more professionals you need, and the more really you need to understand, right, what you're agreeing to or getting. And of course, the tax implications are one of those big things that when that comes back to bite you,
It can
it
be
hurts.
a huge chunk of money. And it also might be a case like in a brokerage account, we pay on the gains, right?
Mhm.
So if those accounts were divided without, so basis is what the account was purchased for. And then the total account value
Mhm.
is, what one gets, what we see on our statement. But if they didn't take into account the basis, and it's a large account, as you said, they could have $500,000 of growth. When that is sold, taxes due immediately on all of that. And that can be a really painful check to write, and a big surprise to some people.
Absolutely. And if you know it ahead of time, and then you can, adjust the value, because
Right.
how much taxes will be. And so, yeah, I think it really is, as far as number one, I think one of the big unknowns that, if people go in unprepared and don't really have a professional who's analyzed what the assets are. And, yeah, it can just be, you can't do anything about it later on that one. And, looking at being prepared as far as tax go, I think that is so important.
Mhm.
Now, let's talk about the settlement agreement itself,
Mhm.
and an error that happens too often in regards to that.
I'd say one of the trickiest, I guess, mistakes that doesn't ever need to be a mistake is when we separate a retirement account. If it is, now this, people I hope their eyes aren't rolling in their heads as we go through this, because if it's an ERISA account, it needs to have a quadro to separate it. So a quadro lingo is qualified domestic relations order. And that's if you have a 401k and you're splitting your assets, you need a quadro to split the assets. If you have a pension or a pension plan, you need the quadro to split the plan. For any of these plans, they need to allow the quadro, and some of them don't. And
Correct.
often it's written in the agreement, okay, we're going to split this account, divorce is finalized, go to split the account with the quadro. The plan says, no, sorry, we will not do that. That can be a huge ticket mistake. I mean, in the millions of dollars at times. So that's a settlement gone wrong with best of intentions.
Right. And yeah, and going to be very difficult and costly to fix. Can we make it right? Because it was clearly a mistake by, obviously you didn't have an attorney, but you would hope you would, but they've got to investigate that and know if that plan, it can be split. And just for our listeners, that, the best case scenario is that pension, that retirement plan gets split, and then you have your share that is going to pay directly to you without having to wait for your husband to send that to you after he received it. And there's a lot of problems in that later on that you would want to avoid for sure, because that's your property. You were entitled to that. Yeah, that one is absolutely as far as retirement accounts and pension accounts. Now, how about an unfavorable settlement? And,
Well, an unfavorable settlement could be when someone, by the duration of their marriage and by income, should get spousal support, also called maintenance, also called alimony, and then they don't. That can be very unfavorable and can hugely impact someone's standard of living, especially if they don't have the means to make up for time that they've been out of the workplace, and you can most often see this, or in my experience, I most often see it if someone is in, say, their late 40s or 50s, they're able to work, but it doesn't usually make sense for them to go back to school to get a new degree because they're not going to be in the workforce necessarily for that long. That going, 2, 3, 4 years back to school is going to keep them out. So any kind of, we would call it rehabilitative support so that they can earn more is probably not likely. And if they have, for whatever reason, accepted less than they could have received, and it might be because I'll speak for myself. In my case, I was like, fine, I will be fine. I will do this. So in my case, my spousal support could have been lifetime based on the duration of my marriage. And I took enough support to get my kids out of high school, and that was it. So that could be seen as an unfavorable settlement. It was my decision in that case, but in a lot of people's cases, it might not be. And this varies so much state to state to state. Some states are formulaic. This is what spousal support would be in our state. And others, it's just like the wild, wild west. You don't know what it will be and what the duration will be. And there's case law to fall back on and kind of sort of guess, but you really don't know.
Yeah, and that's where you definitely, you will rely on your attorney so much so that you are not shortchanging yourself, and, or, that your expectation or is realistic, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. And you're entering this, you really need to have, I find that often our clients just they need a baseline. They need an understanding, based on the financial situation, based on the marriage, the formula, all the factors, because there's always factors that can sway it one way or another. Here's a ballpark of where it should end up. And I think that is so helpful for clients to know, because then at least they're going in, okay, they have a ballpark that is realistic based on the law and their particular situation, not their best friend who got
Right.
divorced and she never has to work a day in her life. And, I want her deal. And it's like, well, it doesn't work that way.
It often, I love that you use the just world, it's a reality check. It's frequently a reality check. And sometimes, clients will come, child support's a really good one, and say, I'm not paying child support. It's like, well, yeah, you are. In every state in the country, there is a formula for child support and they want it enforced. It's not an option.
Yes, exactly.
So
And
reality check.
absolutely. And sometimes that, it should always happen, I think, with your attorney, and you should know, we prepare for mediation in our state. Otherwise it's too expensive to have gone through that entire process if you weren't prepared and ready and able to settle, in my opinion. And
that's actually been like an offshoot. That's been work I'm doing more lately, where I'm not doing the full mediation, but because people aren't prepared, they'll hire me and we prepare them so they know what to expect in their mediation. They know what their assets are. They know what they need to live on, whether it's reasonable or not. So it's like a little mediation prep package, so that if they are in your state and you're going and prepared, wonderful. But here, or I know in others I've encountered, there isn't preparation. So it gives them some kind of, again, context.
yeah, right. Exactly. So yes, we absolutely are prepared. Not to the extent that we would be for trial, but pretty much like you're going to settle. We are going with everything we need to have a full settlement agreement. And that, and most likely we do, we do settle a lot of cases that, are available. So it's not like one attorney just mediates for you and then the other litigates. Like it's the whole thing, for us.
That's
It's
wonderful.
a lot of it, because some cases have litigation, but you still have to do mediation, and there's a mix within there. So I know from my practice and research that women in particular, it takes them a long time to get to the decision to divorce. It's something that by the time they reach out to our office, they have been thinking about it. Most women for quite some time, years, in fact. And then once they get to us, they want it done like yesterday, right? Because it's like, now I made up my mind and I am so done. And of course we're like, okay, wait, like we got to make sure you're protected. So how can this mentality impact the financial aspect of divorce and lead to a mistake?
I think it's almost like a grief process where you're going through stages. And if you rush it and you haven't gone through the process, you both are not educated about your options because it's a whole lot to absorb. And you're in such perhaps an emotional place. And this can be if you're the one who wants the divorce, or if you're the one who was told your partner wants a divorce. You're still kind of riding this roller coaster, and it takes a bit to stabilize, to process the decisions that you have to make, to understand. And as you go through those stages, your opinion changes, your understanding changes, your knowledge base changes. If you rush the process and you're like, okay, wham, I'm ready, I want this done last week, which is natural because it's a hard process. It's expensive. It can be painful. You're dealing with a lot of things when you're ready to move on, and you can't move on because you have to make all these decisions. But you make different decisions over time. And if they're like these knee-jerk things, you might, go back to our last one, you might have an unfair settlement. You might be rushed into agreeing to something that isn't in your best interest, but you're being pressured. I actually have a couple of clients right now who keep reaching back out to me. I'm getting pressured. I'm getting pressured. Like, you need to breathe. And it doesn't matter if you're getting pressured. Like, I know it's uncomfortable, but there's a reason they're pressuring you, and it's not for your benefit.
Exactly. Yeah. And you just have to, sometimes you've got to be patient when you really don't want to, because, most of the time, I know in our practice, we're really working to get you a settlement because we're thinking about you in 3 years from now. We're not thinking about just tomorrow. We're thinking about what are you going to need in the future? And so therefore, that may take a little longer to get the information we need to advise you in the best way, because we know you make these rash decisions, rush the process. 3 years from now, you're going to look back and say, I shouldn't have done that. So we're trying to
Right.
prevent that.
I agree. And I think this is a really important place to just try to have a gut check, like for a client to sit with that. And if they're feeling, especially if there's a power imbalance and they were in a marriage where maybe they didn't make a lot of the decisions and their spouse is used to being able to make decisions or push things through and whatnot. This is really a time for people to stop, breathe, sit with it, and ask yourself, why are they pressuring you? No, it's
Right.
going to be because whatever they're pressuring on is favorable for the other party.
Right.
And then, I don't know, I'm sure you experience this for your clients. When it is a litigation and when attorneys are negotiating and the other spouse says, last and final offer. This is all, and it's usually in what I see around here, it's kind of towards the beginning. It's not a last and final. It's, you're only going to get this. And if you don't accept that, then we're going to be in court for 2 years or 3 years, and you're not going to have anything. That kind of
bullying
and a mental mind game. If you're on the receiving end of that,
it's
tough.
scary. It is
It's
scary.
tough.
And and it causes you to think, I don't have another choice. I don't have another option. And that's where, like at the very beginning, when you were talking about making sure you're choosing the right attorney who you can talk to honestly and who you feel and in your gut, because you're talking about gut, that's got your back and that's going to help you. Sometimes, they got to just, they are going to always level with you and tell you what you need to hear, maybe not what you want to hear, and help you really make those good decisions and be able to know when you're probably making a decision maybe more out of fear and you're being pressured versus, what's in your best interest. Which does come to number 5, which we did address at the very beginning, but what is the number 5?
Emotional decision making.
Yep.
And I think it's like the elephant in the room. We like to think we're logical. We are not. We are emotional. So as long as we're figuring out what impact that emotional, like first, what is the emotion? You just mentioned, is it fear? Is it shame? Is it guilt? Is it love? Is it joy? Freedom? What is the emotion that is impacting the decision? And does it have bearing? Do we need to work through that emotion to get out on the other side of a more mindful decision? I think so. And I think telling someone to just be logical, especially when they're going through divorce, which is one of the most emotional things and life-changing things that a human being can go through, is nonsensical. It's like that feeling you get when you're really agitated and someone says, well, just calm down. Well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Rather than saying, why are you anxious? What is going on here? What do we need to get behind? And I have worked with women who are very high net worth, who will be getting a settlement in the multi-millions, who still fear homelessness. They fear, that they're going to make stupid financial decisions. They fear that it's fearful.
Yeah.
Fear that they're going to be destitute, even with all that money. It's common. So what's behind that? And what is going to help them work through that to make make their own decisions. And it's kind of sexist for me to say women, but that is not a feeling or a concern that I hear voiced in male clients, but I consistently hear it in my female clients.
Yeah, and I think, it's finding out what is that emotion and what is bringing that up, and having a coach or a therapist to talk through that and delve into that before you then make a decision can be so valuable and life-changing in the decisions you're making while you're in this space of, going through a divorce.
And I find having the fact pattern identified that can maybe allay or dispute or negate some of those fears. So if there's a fear that you're not going to be okay, well, where is it coming from? And if we look at the numbers and can use those figures, whether it's assets or support, to show you can live your current standard of living. Now, this isn't always the case.
Right.
And sometimes we need it to show that you can't live your current standard of living. And that becomes part of the discussion. But what are the numbers below these decisions?
Exactly.
And which way do they steer the conversation?
Absolutely. Now, okay, I do have one bonus tip for our listeners, because you shared on your list of mistakes, and that was getting divorced and not executing the agreement. You've got to share. Oh my God, you got to share more about that. Like, tell me what your experience has been.
It's like we've crossed the finish line, our divorce is done, and then the things that were agreed upon in the divorce are not executed. And it can look like you don't change your beneficiaries, and then a partner passes away. Or former partner, excuse me. And sometimes that can be really beneficial to the remaining spouse because they're still the beneficiary of a life insurance policy or something like that. Sometimes maybe that person has a new significant other and passes away and named or remained their old significant other as the beneficiary. That's really unfortunate for the new significant
one.
Yes. So it can be that, or there can be a big monetary swing to it. And this is also impacted by how the agreement is written. So say you're separating a $500,000 retirement account, and the agreement is written that the spouse is going to receive 50% of it. So $500,000, 250. But what if the market goes down 20%? Now it's only 400,000 divided. So 200,000, they lost $50,000 worded that way. We like to see, and we like people to understand, it's plus or minus market gain. That if they wait, and let's say again, it's 50%, and there's a gain. Well, that makes sense that they're going to get the gain. If it is a dollar amount, they're not going to see it. And if I had someone come to me, they had not processed their quadro and it was 4 years, and their settlement, it was a dollar amount. The market had gone up. She lost all of that gain for 4 years of investments because her agreement just had a dollar amount in it.
Well, and she waited, because you shouldn't, like, you need to do it all immediately. Too many things can happen. Let's say, you talked about the reverse, and your spouse passes, or you do with the beneficiaries, but if you're entitled to that money, what if something happens to you? Now you can't leave it to maybe your children or maybe your parents, your sister, whoever you would have, like, and that's going to be a huge ordeal for your estate to go work on that. And it would have been so simple had you followed and acted on your agreement and moved the money, done the things that are required after the divorce is done.
Right. And I don't know whether it's just, it takes so long to get there and people are exhausted, so they don't do it. But I offer my clients a new normal meeting. So when we're done, we have an extra meeting And we go through that checklist of all the things that they need to do
Mhm.
now that they're single. And it's not all financial. It might be they need to do a new will. They need to do an estate plan that's just for them. They need, a lot of it is financial. They should have their own retirement plan.
Mhm.
Another thing that I see with the non-execution of the agreement is people will say, oh, I'll just do what my ex was doing as far as our investments are concerned. That's a big no-no because their ability to earn and invest and their risk tolerance and so on is most likely not the same as yours. So someone could be really aggressively invested and not know it.
Mhm.
And that is troublesome.
Absolutely, because now it's your money and you need to be in charge and you need to have an advisor that you can talk to and that is going to ask you the right questions so that your money is appropriate to your risk tolerance and your lifespan and the things that you want to achieve.
Mhm. Yeah, and understandable.
Absolutely. Well, all right, we're getting towards the end of the show, but I do want to ask you, if you have, like, for our listeners, like, if you find like the biggest misunderstanding or misconception that you think clients, you see often that clients have about finances and divorce and things like that.
The biggest one, the biggest question posed to me is not about finances, it's about process, and it's usually just not knowing where to start.
Mm.
And people thinking the starting place is hiring an attorney. And I think the starting place is figuring out what kind of attorney is a good match for you, what kind of process is a good match for you. It's basically getting information and using that information to make your best decision.
Mhm.
Another common mistake I see is people checking out of their own process.
Mhm.
People plan their weddings down to the mints, down to the matchbooks, down to like every little detail. And in the divorce process, for some reason, there are a lot of people who step back and
Mhm.
just go along for the ride
Yeah.
unless they get better coaching, support, information. So I think that's a common mistake. Like,
Mhm.
just, okay, this is what I should do. I'm just going along. Well, if you didn't match yourself up with the right professional and then you're just going along, that could be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it really could. And I'm glad you mentioned that and compared it to the planning of the wedding and, all the detail. And obviously there are a lot of resources out
Yeah.
there on how to plan for your wedding rather than the resources. Luckily they have your book. We have a lot of books and I have a lot of resources, but nothing, the resources available are nothing compared to what's for a wedding. And you might think, oh, well, that's our future. Well, this is your future. And it may not be the same feelings that you had when, you were getting married. However, it's so important to not check out.
Right. Yeah. And it's hard. It's
Yeah,
hard.
it
And
is.
you need support because your friends will shift and change and you're most likely to kind of sift through. Some will stand by you, some will become better friends, and some just want to be like the Greek chorus or, I call it the drama trauma. Just what's going on? What's going on? Because divorce is that soap opera thing.
Yeah.
Like to get the dirt and things like that. If you find yourself in that space, try to find other people because that's going to impact decision making really negatively. If you're swirling around
Yeah.
in all the drama of it, it's not helpful. It's not helpful for people to make good, sound decisions.
Agreed. I'm glad you said that. Now, before we go, because I'm interested, and you have a chapter in your book about filling your toolbox with touchy-feely yogini stuff.
Mhm.
Can you please share a little bit about what that means?
By that, I mean, I think it's a trap. Again, it's that logical versus emotional. And I think it's a trap to think that you're going to make all these logical decisions and ignore that side of you that needs support, that needs to breathe, that needs to be nurtured, that needs to be held. You are, again, whether you're the one who wants the divorce or you were told, you're losing your partner. You're losing this mainstream relationship. What are you going to fill that up with? What are you going to put in that space? And spending time, whatever works for you, is it reading a book? Is it murder mysteries? Is it bubble baths? Is it yoga? Is it meditation? It's not going to be the same for everyone, and it's not going to be the same at different times through this process, because it can be a really long process. But it really is, it's self-care, and the self-care isn't manicures and a facial. The self-care is, what do you need to come out as intact as possible on the other side of this, and making sure that rather than powering through, that you're paying attention to that, and that you're getting the support and the care and the space that you need.
Absolutely. Well, that is great advice. And it's just true. It's just the truth. There's no doubt about it. Now, okay. So this is the last question. I keep having more questions, Brenda, but
Last question.
the last question that I always ask everybody is, over the years of your practice and, your career, what can you share with our women listeners about what you've learned about working with women over the years?
That we're too hard on ourselves, that we're not responsible for everything in the world, that sometimes it's just not you, not your fault, not your shame, not your responsibility, not your guilt. And we take all that stuff on. And especially when, back to the touchy-feely yogini stuff, when you're going through something as hard as this, try to be as gentle as you can on yourself, because we tend to beat the living daylights out of ourselves way too much.
Well, thank you for that, Brenda. I agree with you. Now, for our listeners, we're going to have all of your connections in the show notes, and they can find you at brendabridges.com. Is that correct?
That is my financial advisor website.
Okay.
bridgingdivorcesolutions.com is my divorce website.
Wonderful. We will have that in the show link as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for all the amazing work that you do.
Well, thank you for being with us today. This has been a great, great show. I appreciate all your information, and I know our listeners do as well. And we've reached the end of our show today. Thank you so much to Brenda for joining us to discuss financial mistakes in divorce. Listeners, if you or someone you know is going through divorce or is thinking about a divorce, please reach out to us at FloridaWomenslawGroup.com. Also, we invite you to join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. Links will be in the episode description. And also, if you enjoyed this show, please leave us a 5-star review, and we look forward to hearing from you next time. Are you facing the challenges of divorce and feeling overwhelmed? Introducing Divorce 101, your essential online course designed to empower you through the divorce process. I'm Heather Quick, attorney and CEO at Florida Women's Law Group. Gain confidence and clarity with expert guidance on legalities, financial considerations, and your emotional well-being. We believe in empowering you to navigate this journey with strength and knowledge. Enroll in Divorce 101 today and take control of your future. As a valued podcast listener, you will get $100 off the course. So please see the show notes for the promo code and the link. You can also find out more at FloridaWomenslawGroup.com, or always call us at 904-567-0121. Divorce for women, by women.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Women Winning Divorce. My goal is to elevate your life and the way you are thinking so that you are best equipped to win at life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. And I would love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social and join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. We welcome your comments and suggestions. We want to bring you content that helps move your life forward. Women Winning Divorce is the place for an elevated conversation on how women can thrive during times of adversity in order to live their best life.